Hey guys, I am just jumping on to talk a little bit about Chapter 6 predictors. Predictors are basically criteria. We can't test criteria, so we use predictors to determine future performance. So like you would use your school tests, your GRE or whatever, to possibly determine your future performance on a job. Predictors, how we choose them begins with, if you said job analysis, you're correct. So we did that right. We started with our job analysis. We narrowed down our important KSAOs and tasks from the job analysis. Then we narrowed those down from our ultimate to our actual criterion. So we chose several that we can test, right? On page 170 in your textbook, there's a great little graph, and it tells you what specific predictor type you would use to test for either knowledge or skills or abilities. So for knowledge, you would use biodata, or either specific or general cognitive ability, because if you're testing knowledge, you want to know what the person already knows about the specific thing, right? For a skill, you could use biodata. You should read in your textbook what biodata means. You would use biodata, personality tests, or interview. For ability, to determine their abilities, you would again use biodata. Or a work sample, which I did not assign those pages, but it is kind of interesting to read up on work samples, especially if you think at any point in your life you might be interviewing for a job. It is interesting to read up on how that is done. Or you would again use the interview. You can, of course, use other tests. It's not to say the others are wrong, but each of these would specifically give you the knowledge that you're seeking. Chapter went over all sorts of classifications of tests. We're going to skip over those. I'm going to speak a second about the types of predictors. First off, if you remember way back in the beginning of class, we discussed reliability and validity. The most important thing to determine is if your test is valid and reliable. So is it actually measuring what you want it to measure, right? So if you have a test that's awesome at measuring one thing, but you're using it to measure your criterion, and it's not actually measuring that, it's useless, right? Specific types of predictors. We will start with cognitive ability tests. There's general cognitive ability and there's specific cognitive ability. So a general cognitive ability test would be like your GRE score, your SAT score. Specific would be what you know about a very specific situation or matter, or if you're a lawyer, what you know about the law type of thing, right? Cognitive ability tests hold a high validity. The validity coefficient is 0.53, which means that about 25% of the differences in how people respond or act their performance is due to their cognitive ability. That's a huge amount. Specific cognitive ability tests, there are a few. There's mechanical, which is exactly what it sounds like, mechanics, tools, etc. There's spatial, which is kind of how you view things and how you process what you see and what needs to be done. And then there is clerical ability test, which is what you'd use like if you were a secretary, something like that, just to basically determine whether what you see is what gets put on the paper, right? Another test is that of emotional intelligence, which basically, I'm going to read this one. Emotional intelligence refers to ability of individuals to generate, recognize, express, understand, and evaluate their own and others' emotions. Very important. It actually, it its correlation, validity correlation is 0.47. So emotional intelligence, again, almost a full 25% accounts for how people act or perform. So if you're going to combine emotional intelligence with cognitive ability, you're going to, in general, be able to have a good determination of how someone might perform on their job. Let me see, personality tests. So these are like the fun ones that everybody likes to do on, the internet or whatever. There are a few measures of personality that are very indicative of how you will do on a future job. So, and a lot of companies use personality tests. I think some of it is just kind of fun. It helps the organization understand how you might react under a certain situation. But it also kind of helps them know, like, maybe what team or department you should be placed on, right? There are a few measures of personality that are highly indicative of how you will perform on the job. Conscientiousness, so how you think of others. And or it also determines, like, if you're going to follow the rules and turn things in on time. Just basically be aware of everyone else around you, trying to make it the best for everybody, right? And extroversion is also highly correlated with job performance. The two together, conscientiousness and emotional intelligence, are very highly correlated with your future job performance. So if you score high on conscientiousness and high on emotional intelligence, you will likely perform well on that job. Some other tests, there's integrity tests, which is basically different questions to determine how honest you're going to be in a certain situation. There are work samples, which, again, that's another area. It's kind of interesting to read. Something called like an in-basket, and you're timed for 20 or 30 minutes. And it would basically be, if you come into work and you have a pile of things and you go through them one by one and determine your answer and then flip to the next one, and they just kind of judge how you responded to each specific situation. Lastly, and I think I'm actually going to do a second video to discuss interviews, because I really want you to see that part, since it's what we're working on today.